There you go, found it. Nonsense of the day. So this has been going on recently, this thing. And it's, so this post has become viral on Twitter. I kind of wanted to hear what you guys think about it, discuss a little bit about this, because I don't know how this stuff becomes viral, because this isn't new. And that's the first thing I want to show you. This isn't new. So, you know me, when it comes to like women and ancient period and whatnot, I've actually made videos, for example, talking about women warriors and the reality behind it, because women warriors compared to men warriors are a minute percentage, but they still existed, and I found all the sources, and I don't have a problem sharing that. With that being said, this is nonsense. This is nonsense. So let me read it. Prehistoric women were probably better at hunting than men, scientists suggest. And today we're going to read a few articles with C, because as you see, study suggests, and then scientists suggests. Yeah, it's not scientists. So this is the first thing that I think is a red flag when it comes to talking about this sort of situation. But the first thing we should say, how are prehistoric women better at hunting than men? Like, how? Because, of course, if you bring in sexual dimorphism, on average, once again, we are talking averages, but on average, we do know that men tend to be physically stronger than women. Now, I'm not saying that strength is the only component of being an effective hunter, nor am I saying that it's impossible that in certain situations, maybe populations of the steppes, maybe specific areas in Eurasia or Africa, there were scenarios in which women would help hunting. I'm not saying that that wouldn't happen. But then again, depending on what sort of hunting we are talking about, why would you say that women are better at hunting than men? It sounds very counterintuitive, doesn't it? And that's the thing. I looked into this. I did. It's not that they're presenting actual academically backed sources and they're telling you, no, we reviewed this number of skeletons and skeletal remains within any given population cluster in these specific areas, and then we found that women were actually whatever. No. You know what they're talking about? Can you guess it? I want to see if the chat guesses what this is actually about. Because that's when I read it, I'm like, oh, so it's nonsense. I'll just give you a second. So Daxel says, because for propaganda. Well, yeah, there is a message behind it, of course. Just like there is a message sometimes when people say 0% of cases there were never women warriors, and that's also false. Because there are cases, the Ayazages as one of the populations, and usually those who push this idea don't even know what population that is, Sarmatians. There are situations in which we do know that there were women warriors. Now, given minute percentage, once again, the majority of warriors were men, but when you tell me there were no women warriors, then I'm going to present the evidence. But in this case, it is a message too. Say, Colin says more nimble. No. Women be smarter. Good guess, but no. Better than modern day men? No. Oh man, I'm having a good time. Let's see if you guys can figure it out. Someone saying maybe because they say women have peripheral vision. No man. I mean, you're really giving them, you're really making the people that are writing these articles, you're making them 10 times smarter than they are. I'm gonna tell you. The reason why they say that women were better at hunting than men is because of gender equality. In the Paleolithic. Wait. Gender equality in the Paleolithic. This is what this is about. A Neolithic and Mesolithic. Can you imagine a Mesolithic man? A man from the Mesolithic. In a tribe, cavemen, like whatever it is. And they're like, oh yeah, no, we respect women. They are equal to us. And so that's why we hunt, they hunt. Which, by the way, that would make them equal. It wouldn't even make them better, but whatever. Gender equality and they say that there was gender equality in the Mesolithic, in the Paleolithic, and in the Neolithic for millions of years. So that's why I'm saying all the way back to the Paleolithic, I guess, there was gender equality. So the message is there should also be gender equality today, because that's the message. Science Daily, your source for the latest nonsense. Challenging prehistoric gender roles, will you? Team discovered little evidence to support the idea that roles were assigned specifically to each sex. Source, University of Delaware. I'd rather the source was Stone Age, what have you. Summary: anthropologists challenge the traditional view of men as hunters and women as gatherers in prehistoric times. Their research reveals evidence of gender equality. There we go. Gender equality, 2,500,000 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. Gender equality, yeah, all these Stone Age men, they were all like, oh yeah, women are equal to us and they can vote in our society. Didn't you know that? Women had right to vote in the prehistoric Neolithic societies, and welcome to my life. The study sheds light on the gender bias in past research and calls for a more nuanced understanding of prehistoric gender roles. It's a familiar story to many of us. In prehistoric times, men were hunters and women were gatherers. Women were not physically capable of hunting because their anatomy was different from men. Hold on a minute. Women can be physically capable of hunting. Definitely not the pregnant ones, definitely not the young ones, but their anatomy is different. That's a fact. And I know what you're thinking right now. You think, oh, Metron, you're being pedantic. They're not actually saying, no, they're saying it because you'll find it down this study. That's exactly what they're saying. No physical, anatomical, biological difference. And because men were hunters, they drove human evolution. I'm not sure who would state this. At the end of the day, human evolution was driven, losing my English, was driven by humans. That's what I would say. I wouldn't make it about sex. These people are fixated, but that story is not true, according to research by University of Delaware anthropology professor Sarah Lacey, which was recently published in Scientific American and in 2 papers in the journal American Anthropologist. Lacey and her colleagues, Cara, from the University of Notre Dame, oh, there we go, examined the divisions of labor according to sex during the Paleolithic era, approximately 2.5 million to 12,000 years ago. Through a review of current archaeological evidence and literature, they found little evidence to support the idea that roles were assigned specifically to each sex. Well, of course you have, because finding evidence when dealing with the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, it's the most ancient one, the stone, the earliest of the stone. Finding data about something specific as this is extremely difficult. Also because, it's prehistoric, which means before history, which means before they wrote down and told us how they did things. Perhaps iconography, paintings, murals, material goods, but they're not going to write because it's prehistory. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The team also looked at female physiology and found that women were not only physically capable of being hunters, sure, but that there is little evidence to support that they were not hunting. Once again, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. I don't know how I need to explain that to a university. Lacey's a biological anthropologist, goodness gracious, who studies the health of early humans. And Okobok is a physiologist who makes analogies between modern day and the fossil record. Okay? a modernist of the fossil record. Friends in graduate school, they call I don't care. Anyway, researchers found examples of equality for both sexes in ancient tools: diet, art, burials, and anatomy. Wait, let me read that again. The researchers found examples of equality for this, and anatomy. Equality of anatomy between men and women is nonsense. Nonsense. It is a fact of biology and science that the sexual dimorphic traits and differences between male and females within the human species are substantial when it comes to stature, body composition, body mass, phenotypic traits in male and females. And these are evident across several different types of samples, regardless of different types of nutrition. Males tend to have a 36% more lean body mass, 65% more muscle mass, 75% more arm muscle mass than women, which of course yields parallel sex differences in strength. The majority of these are more evident in the upper body strength. And as you probably know, on the opposite side of the spectrum, women tend to have a higher degree of fat accumulation as a neurodevelopmental resource. And whenever we talk about these sexual dimorphism traits that are different in male and female, usually you will see that there is a focus in body mass. And one of the reasons is body mass and strength are both important factors when it comes to advantages in aggressive scenarios, including hunting, combat, and whatnot. So does this mean that only men are capable of hunting? No. But the idea that you're saying that it's all equal, they're all equal, no, absolutely not. There isn't physiological equality between the sexes. Having illustrated this middle school fact, it is only logical to understand that then it will be a higher percentage of men that will engage in hunting than women. That, of course, doesn't mean that no woman has ever engaged in hunting in the history of mankind. I'm not saying that, because I'm not an idiot. If there was a 100% divergent pattern behavior when it comes to what people were doing, well, okay, the men got the meat and the women cooked the meat, they would both be helping in the advance, even if that were the case. Not that I'm saying that it was, but I'm saying even if it were the case, well, both are contributing. You don't have, I think it's a fixation with modern academics particularly, that they have to say that women and men are absolutely identical, women and men are great and skilled at the same things, and in fact, oftentimes they're going to say that women are better at doing things that we know for a fact that men tend to be better at doing. I don't understand that. Value is not determined by exact equality of skills. Men and women are both equally valuable, but in completely different ways. It is a fact biologically, it is a fact societally, and even though I'm not going to say that every single item of diversion when it comes to what we are expected to do in our society comes directly from biology or science. Absolutely, some things are culturally driven, which is why we have some diversity when it comes to the different approaches to what women do. The Ayadages I mentioned a second ago, or the populations of the steppes, or maybe even early Akkadian kingdoms. Still, this idea that, oh, this is so disrespectful, it's not. I know she didn't say that, but it's clearly what the problem is. The value of a woman is not calibrated onto how many male-like things she can do, and vice versa. All right. Now, whatever you think about gender equality, which to me is a case by case, because on some things I like some ideas that have to do with gender equality, but on other things I don't, because there is sexual dimorphism, which some of these articles they contrast and they say it doesn't exist. Yes, I think men and women are equal in value, but men and women are different in purpose. That's the way I see it, both biologically and culturally, because there is a cultural aspect to it, right? There is a cultural aspect to it, which is why it varies place to place. And then this is usually, and that's usually an extension built upon biological differences that are a matter of fact. But regardless of that, and value, by the way, if you look at it, and that's because I am adding my thoughts, right? So I am adding culture and social ideas to it. Because if we only had to look at biological value, then it would make even less sense to risk women at hunting. Because if you have equal number of men and equal number of women, if you have one man with 10 women, you can reproduce 10 times. But if you have the opposite, doesn't work. You can have 10 men, one woman, it's still one child every 9 months. So biologically, it doesn't make sense to risk women, neither in hunting parties nor in war. But then I add the social aspect of it, I add the thinking, and then I say, okay, but I do like the idea of, giving him an equal value because of our humanity, but then we excel at different things, and that's that. However, yeah, so that's what I say. But then there are other aspects that I will always open the door for a woman. So at that point, in that specific instance, because I like the idea of gentleman, old school, protecting women, protecting children, I love that. Then I'm not really in that aspect, I'm not being equal, because I would open the door for a woman. So whatever. Doesn't matter. That's just me. You can disagree. We can have different opinions. Doesn't matter what you think. What about salary and all that, which to me should be based on skill, whatever. It doesn't matter what we think about the nitty-gritty details of equality and gender. What matters is that in the Paleolithic, there was no gender equality. There was no gender equality, definitely not in the modern sense, but come on. But that's the message, guys. That's the message, guys. Prehistoric equality, that's what, and that's how it is. That's what we are looking at. So are these actually scientists? I would say they are as much scientists as the same scientists that said Corrado Malanga and Armando May. Yeah, that level of scientists. That's what we're talking about. Yeah, imagine the Neanderthals. I'm sure the Neanderthals were all about giving voting rights to women. Neanderthal, 100%. Absolutely. There was no door in prehistoric time to hold. Yeah, when was the first door made? I don't know, maybe after people settled in the Neolithic, and at that point we did have doors, and that's still prehistory. So I would imagine, yes, there were doors in prehistoric period. Maybe like the very beginning, no. But if you think about it, bows and arrows for hunting are Mesolithic tech already. Even before we settled, which makes sense, because in the Mesolithic, a lot of hunter-gatherer operations were happening. And so it makes sense that they already came up with bows and arrow. Now, where bows and arrows used for war, what I imagine if you had wars between tribes, I don't think it takes that much of a intelligence gap to really recognize that if you shoot a deer dead, you can also shoot the muppet from the other tribe that is trying to burn your house down with the same bow and arrow. So I would imagine that probably spears, javelins, bows and arrows, even when made of flint, they were already used for warfare. It's just that it's difficult to document because it's the prehistoric period we're talking about. Cave women were trad wives. I mean, yeah. Why does society hate the fact that men and women are different? Asks Filth. Asks the Filth Pig. That's his name, guys. I'm not insulting the guy. It's all about tribalism right now. If we really want to find a connection to the prehistoric period, here you have it. Politics are tribalistic. So if my tribe says A, then the other tribe says B, I'm gonna say A because they said B, and vice versa. And at that point, it doesn't even matter what you think or what you don't think, because then we enter the realm of mass psychology, and I would strongly suggest you to read Bernays, because he has a phenomenal book on it. It's called Propaganda, his book, by the way. It's a fantastic read. And I have my own video on it. And it's interesting how psychology for the individual does not work in the same way as psychology for the group. Because when you have psychology for the group, oftentimes a single individual will conform to the group for social rewards. Just because the group thinks something, then you're going to think it too. Yeah, Freud's nephew, that's the guy. So what are the men doing? If the women are the hunters, what are the men doing? I think it's because they find it, some people, not they, not everyone, but because, as I say, my community is very mixed. I got people that have different positions, but I think the kind of people that write these articles find it offensive to think that men were hunters and women were gatherers, which to me does make logical sense. I'm not against the idea that women in some societies did help with the hunting. I'm not against that. If I can find it again, guys, I remember finding an article, then we're going to look for it. But I remember finding an article that did not just say that women were the best hunters in prehistoric societies, but they said that among women, the best hunters were grandmas. Why is it always grandmas? First, his grandma told me that Cleopatra was black. Now, grandma is the best hunter. Man, what is it with grandmas? What is it with grandmas, guys? Grandma, can you imagine a grandma with a spear, like badass, spearing the freaking mammoth to death on her own, while the men are home with all packed with muscle, but the men are home doing the little flowers, while grandma is killing it. Grandma is killing it. Yeah, Drop says men have better spatial awareness, coordination, strength, speed, and dexterity. On average, I agree with you. I mean, it's not even a matter of debate. It's basic biology at that point. Again, it doesn't mean that a woman can't throw a javelin and hit a deer. Of course, a woman can. But if we are looking on averages and we are looking tribalistic, let's also keep in mind that women get pregnant. And when a woman is pregnant, not only, if you think about the last 3 months, obviously she's not going to be able to do that, which means that there will be definitely in a population, in a tribal population, right? Whether it be nomadic, whether it be settled, there will be periods of times in which less women, even if they were both participating in hunting parties, there will be moments in which the women will not be able to do that. But that's also the beginning of pregnancy. I asked pregnant women about this, and they say that the first 4 weeks, they're starting to get morning nausea. Can you imagine hunting a mammoth while you're having morning nausea? Not to mention period, women on their period. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So again, I'm not saying that it never happened. I'm very oriented to the idea that it did happen. It's just, how are they better if literally they have biological disadvantages for this? Now, if by hunting they mean that they were chasing smaller prey, maybe the men were chasing bigger prey, I can see that, but still better sounds like a message. And it is a message. It is a message. Craig says, and pre-pastoral farming women breastfed until the child was about 4 years old. Thank you for sharing that. And Craig has a great channel, by the way, so had to be around with the child a lot. Absolutely. Goodness gracious, Grandma. I gotta see if I can find it. I'm gonna look for it, guys, right now, because we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna have a great time. All right, let's see. Early women were hunters, found it. Ancient women were hunters. And grandma, ooh, I got it. I got it. Man, I'm on top of my game today. I'm top of my game. Wait. Ancient history. This is from NPR. I don't even know what it is. Ancient history, women were hunters. Because now everyone is going to copy paste it, of course. This is the content mill copycat And grandmas were the most skilled ones, study suggests. This is from 2023, it isn't new, but I told you, I don't make stuff up. Guys, I don't make stuff up. It's grammar. It's grandmas, guys. Can you imagine grandma with a freaking spade? Even bow and arrow. How is grandma gonna pull the bow? Unless it's like, yeah, but grandma's only took care of hares and rabbit. Then I guess, I imagine the men coming back from the hunting party, and they're like, oh look, we got one mammoth, or we got, I don't know, 2 deer. But grandma got you, in the meantime, grandma got you 67 rabbits. Then I guess if the only metric is the number of kills, then I suppose grandma is number one. Don't mess with grandma. Scientists, quote unquote. Let's see how they defend this. All right. Scientists have long held that early human men did the hunting and women the gathering. Yes. A new review of data on foraging societies in modern times suggests that most women hunted. Now, I would like to underline that, what do you see here? I see modern times. So why are we talking about prehistory again? While you also write history, which is... History is not prehistory. Someone needs to tell them that. Someone needs to tell them that. I'm having a great time, by the way. I'm going to give 15 articles today. Scientists have long... Yeah, okay, we got it. For decades, scientists commonly believed that early humans had a pretty strict division of labor. Men did the hunting, women did the gathering. That view has been shifting, and a new study could upend it. NPR Science Desk correspondent, whoever this is here to explain. Let's go. Explain. Explain. No, thank you. Not going to give you a dollar. Shapiro, I don't think it's Ben. How did scientists even come up with this early vision of man as a hunter, woman as a gatherer? We are talking about humans that lived millennia ago, right? Well, if we are talking about the Paleolithic, we are talking about at least hundreds of thousands of years to even 1 million, 1.5 million, depending on how you count it, that changes. But no, we're not talking just millennia. Shapiro. And Eisenman says, yeah, this is the period starting around, 200,000 years ago when we first emerged as a species, even longer than that, 9,000 years ago when humans started to develop agriculture, great. But all over the world there have been a fair number of people in remote areas who still live this foraging life, and so scholars have looked to them as a sort of window into humanity's past. Anthropologists would go live with them, produce detailed reports, and that's fantastic. And they said that women were hunting, great. Shapiro. And so is the tally what this new study has done? Exactly. This was done by a team from University of Washington and Seattle Pacific University through accounts as far as back as 1800 through the present day. And their findings published in the journal PLOS ONE. It's always journal PLOS ONE. What is it with PLOS ONE, by the way? I keep saying PLOS ONE. My grandma did have a sick aim, says Hernan. Yeah. Is that in almost 80% of societies, there is data from women when hunting. Okay, so the idea that some women participate in hunting depending on what you need, I am not against that, but let's go. Yeah, there we go. Kara Wall Schleffer, I don't know who this is because it's not part of these two. The hunting was purposeful. Women had their own toolkit. They had favorite weapons. Grandmas were the best hunters of the village. I'm sorry, what? Grandmas, guys. And somehow they connect this to 100 to 200,000 years ago. Grandmas. Women were hunting large mammals. Okay, says the study, but we'll have to see. And also notice, in a third of the cases, so they have reviewing how many modern, by the way, modern tribalistic societies, I don't know. Did they give us the number? But whatever, only a third, which means 2/3, which is the majority, by the way. These people don't even know how averages work. Yeah, if grandmas hunted snails, but already notice that we are reading this, 2 out of 3, it was the men then that did the big hunting. So doesn't this already disprove it anyways? Whatever. Let's see. And of course, we are talking about wider implications. That's what they're interested in. Wider implications, guys. I'm fascinated how they even learned that grandmas were the best hunters in the village. Yes, still, I'm not understanding that. Yeah. Wall Schleffer notes that when these narratives of gender differences in early humans enter a wider culture, it can be damaging because people may assume oh, that was the more natural way to live. And then they use that to argue that gender roles should be more rigid today. No, I think that's what you are doing. I think it's the opposite. You're projecting right now. I don't think we should base how gender roles are to the way things were structured in the Paleolithic. Am I right? You are doing that. The person writing this article is saying, look, in the Paleolithic, that's what they did, so today we should do the same. It's literally projecting, guys. You know, even among scholars, this prior possibility mistaken understanding of the evidence of early humans hunting may have led to faulty science when it comes to the other main strand of evidence on this topic. I'm talking now about ancient burial sites. Oh, I've got a lot to say about that. Careful, because I'm prepared. And the human remains and artifacts found there. I spoke with Randy Haas of Wayne State University back in 2018. He was part of the team in Peru that found 9,000-year-old individual buried with an unusual large number of hunting tools. Great. And then Randy says, we all just assumed that this individual was a male. And everybody sitting, talking around, saying things like, wow, this is amazing. He must have been a great hunter, a great warrior. Two separate things, by the way. Maybe he was a chief, until they used some newer technology to check the bones and found that this was a woman. So Haas and his collaborators then realized similar finds across the Americas. Again, we need to see the percentages of these finds. They found about half of the time people buried with hunting tools were female, but these discoveries have basically gone under the radar, just like the findings about modern-day hunter-gatherer described in this latest study. The evidence has been sitting there all along in plain sight. How would you react to this? How would you respond to this? Because I already know what to say, but I want to see if you guys have some. Why do you think that the simple fact that you find buried bones and there is a funerary kit involved, this is what this is about, and then we see, wait, this funerary kit has an axe head, or this funerary kit has a spear, or this funerary kit has a bow, and maybe even other types of weapons, or a shield, and then we see, oh look, the bones are female. Does that automatically mean that this funerary kit involves a woman warrior or a woman hunter? The answer is no, not automatic. It could, because you know me, when I do think it is, then I'll say it. But no, it's not automatic. Because I want to see what Saint says. If true, maybe women were carrying men's tools like how we put our items in their handbags today. Oh, I love your humor, man. But no, so here is how it is. In a lot of societies, whether it be Bronze Age, whether it be the Iron Age, or even all the way up to the early medieval period, when you find the bones of a female, the weapons that are part of the funerary kit are a status indicator. So, and this is not being sexist, by the way, I'm not being sexist. It is just the truth. Oftentimes, if a woman is buried with a sword, or if a woman is buried with other spearhead, it could mean that she was a woman of status, which means she was married to a man who was a warrior, or a politician, or an aristocrat, or a hunter. And so when she dies, she is buried with these implements which in their society underline their status. But it doesn't mean that she knew how to use it. Okay? It's not necessarily to say that maybe there was a case that she knew she was trained in combat. I mean, there are some Japanese women that were trained in combat for sure. And so were the Sarmatians, but the Sarmatians are a very specific population of the steppes where women needed to get 3 kills before they could get married. It was different, and those are very isolated instances where we know that there were like some Sarmatian women that wore bronze scale, and fought on horseback. But those are very minute occasions, and the Romans marvel at them, by the way. We have sources. The Romans are like, what? These were women? Because it's a strange thing. Usually it's men that know how to operate these weapons. That's the first thing. And then sometimes, I remember this finding in a museum in Scandinavia where there were some female bones together with a funerary kit, which did seem to suggest a warrior connotation, shield, axe, even sword. So not only a warrior, but a successful one, because a sword is more expensive than a spear. A million articles popped up saying, half of those articles were saying, look, it's a shield maiden, female warrior, go women. And the other half was saying, look, it's a transgender man. So it's a woman that identified as a man in a Norse context. They were both wrong. They were both wrong, because you know what happened? We investigated the museum, and the museum specifically said it was really easy. I'm not talking like an investigation that took hours of manpower. I'm talking about something that I found in 1 hour. And the museum said, oh no, the bones have been mixed. They've been moved around. We have no idea what funerary kit belongs to what set of bones. So everything that they had built on both sides of this discussion was nothing. Was based on nothing. So first you need to, when you see this type of stuff, you need to first confirm that the bones are actually connected to the funerary kit that we are reviewing. After that's confirmed, before you go and type the articles, after that's confirmed, we need to see, okay, what culture is this, and does this culture have a habit, a cultural habit of burying women because of who their husbands were? And if that's the case, let's see if we have an inscription that tells us who this woman is. And then if that's the case, you can already write it off. Okay, most likely she didn't have a clue how to use that axe. If that's confirmed, they're like, no, this woman, it's her. She didn't have, maybe she was a rich woman, whatever, but she didn't have a powerful husband. Then we can start talking, maybe she knew, maybe she was a hunter, maybe she was a warrior. But in a lot of cases, you can dismiss already by section 2 of our investigation. I'm not saying it never happened, but I'm just saying you can't just make that connection right there so quickly, because as you can see, we know that this happened. It was part of how you underline the status of a woman in classical antiquity all the way up to the medieval period.